The Mekong River moves like memory, slow, winding, impossible to pin down. Along its muddy banks, in villages built on stilts, and in cities where languages blur, live people who carry two names, but belong to neither. On paper, they are Vietnamese. But in the quiet, in the way they speak to their elders, cook their food, and remember their dead, they are something else. Something older. You won't find their story in most textbooks. Their birth certificates tell one version, their blood another. Because hidden deep inside their DNA is a journey that began centuries ago, in kingdoms that no longer exist, across borders that were never meant to hold still. They are Vietnamese Cambodians, or maybe Cambodian Vietnamese. Even they aren't always sure. But their bodies remember what politics tried to erase. Their fathers came on foot, or in boats, or with armies. Their mothers stayed behind in sacred land, carrying ancient lineages in silence. Some were forced together by war. Others found love where language failed. And now, their descendants walk a narrow edge between two identities, accepted by neither, shaped by both. But what makes them truly unique isn't just who their ancestors were. It's how those ancestors collided. The wars, the migrations, the colonial projects, the genocides, they didn't just leave scars. They left instructions, hidden codes, shaped faces, changed eyes, mixed tongues. If you look closely enough at their genes, their history, their bones, you'll find a story too complex for any one nation to claim. So what does it mean to be born from the silence between two countries? What secrets does their DNA still carry from the empires that rose and fell before anyone drew a border on a map? To understand that, we have to go back to a place where the land was one. The rivers had no names, and a single step could carry you from Vietnam into Cambodia without anyone noticing. A place where the bridge wasn't made of stone, but blood. The Mekong Delta doesn't look like a battlefield. It's peaceful, soft, almost dreamlike, water curling around rice fields, boats gliding silently through narrow canals. But if rivers could speak, this one would whisper about a border that never truly existed. Because here, between Vietnam and Cambodia, the land never picked a side, and neither did the people. Long before there were maps or flags or names like Vietnamese or Cambodian, this region was part of the Khmer Empire, a powerful kingdom that stretched far into what we now call southern Vietnam. Back then, there were no checkpoints, no passports, just villages, temples, and families. And those families? Their descendants still live here today. But now they speak Vietnamese. Their children go to Vietnamese schools. Yet ask their elders, and they'll tell you the stories in Khmer. It's a strange kind of inheritance, one shaped not by birthright, but by history's push and pull. The place we now call the Mekong Delta was once Khmer Krom, Lower Cambodia. And though it was slowly taken, piece by piece, through centuries of expansion under the Nguyen lords, the Khmer people who lived here didn't disappear. They adapted. Some married into Vietnamese families. Others stayed quiet, holding on to their traditions behind closed doors. Their language softened. Their names changed, but their blood stayed the same. Then came the French, and with them, a new idea: borders, nations, labor. They encouraged Vietnamese workers to move even deeper into Cambodia, offering land, jobs, and power. Thousands came, peasants, soldiers, merchants. And with them came something else: genes. Mixed families, hybrid identities, children born with Vietnamese fathers and Khmer mothers, raised in a world where belonging was never simple. Imagine growing up in a village where your name is written in Vietnamese, but your grandmother still prays in Khmer, where your mother's lullabies don't match the language they teach at school, where your family remembers when this land had another name. And yet, everyone around you says that name is gone. But what if it isn't? What if those old names, old stories, old bloodlines, what if they're not lost at all? What if they're hidden in the one place no empire, no war, no border can erase? Inside the DNA. When you look at Cambodia on a map, it feels small, quiet even. But inside the bones of its people is one of the oldest stories in Southeast Asia. Long before modern borders, before temples rose from the jungle, there was already something ancient living in the land. The Khmer, Cambodia's heart and history, belong to the Austroasiatic language family, one of the first to ever echo through this part of the world. But even their roots go deeper, because around 2,000 years ago, something unexpected happened. A new genetic wave came in, not from China, like you'd expect, but from the south, from India. At a place called Angkor Boreai, scientists found the remains of a person who lived in the shadow of the Funan Kingdom. And when they sequenced the DNA, they found something shocking. That individual carried almost half of their ancestry from South Asia. Think about that. Long before ships from Europe came, long before colonial rule, there were already genetic bridges stretching across oceans. Trade routes didn't just carry spices and gold, they carried people. And people left pieces of themselves behind. Now shift your eyes east, into Vietnam. Here, the picture is completely different. Vietnam isn't one story, it's a mosaic. The majority group, the Kin, descend from a fusion of the Dong Sun people, those bronze drum makers who lived close to rivers and the earth, and migrants from southern China who brought new technologies, new genes, new ways of living. But that's just the beginning. Vietnam is home to 54 officially recognized ethnic groups. Tai speakers in the mountains, Austroasiatic villagers tucked deep in the forests, Austronesian seafarers who once ruled the coasts, each group with its own thread in the genetic weave. While Cambodia held tightly to its core, Vietnam became a crossroads. Diversity wasn't just cultural, it was biological. And right at the intersection of these two worlds, between Cambodia's deep-rooted stillness and Vietnam's ever-shifting blend, you find the Khmer Krom. On the outside, they seem simple enough, ethnically Khmer, living inside Vietnam, speaking fluent Vietnamese. But genetically, they are a whisper of an older Cambodia, wrapped in the clothes of modern Vietnam. Their DNA carries markers from both sides, silent proof that borders don't always tell the truth. This is where Vietnamese Cambodians begin to stand out. They are not just a product of one nation absorbing another. They are a population born from contrast, from mobility, from centuries of movement, mixing, survival. Cambodian DNA tends to stay the same across the map, stable, familiar. Vietnamese DNA jumps and swirls. But in the Vietnamese Cambodians, you see both. A calm river and the storm beneath it. But what does that actually look like inside the code? How do you see a person's story inside their chromosomes? To find that answer, we have to go deeper, into the invisible layers of their DNA. And once you do, you might never look at identity the same way again. Inside the body of every person is a story that can't be seen with the eye. It doesn't show in the language you speak, the name on your passport, or even the color of your skin. It lives deeper, in your blood, in your cells, in the code that built you before you were even born. For Vietnamese Cambodians, that code is like an invisible map, drawn by thousands of years of history, and it tells a story far more complicated than anyone ever imagined. Let's start with the Y chromosome, the line that follows fathers and grandfathers. Among the Khmer of Cambodia, there's a powerful presence of a genetic marker called OM95. It's old. It's local. It ties them to the Austroasiatic peoples who've lived in the region for ages, long before borders were drawn. But move east into Vietnam, and the pattern shifts. Vietnamese men, especially the Kin majority, often carry different markers, OM122 and OM119. These are linked to East Asia, to the great waves of migration from southern China that swept through the region over thousands of years. Yet even in Vietnam, that same old OM95 still shows up, quiet, persistent, reminding us that Southeast Asia was always a meeting point, not a dividing line. Now imagine a child born from these two currents, a Vietnamese father, a Cambodian mother. That child's Y-DNA carries one history, but the rest of their body tells another. Because when scientists look at mitochondrial DNA, the maternal line that travels through mothers, they find something beautiful. Haplogroups like B5A and F1A, markers common across Cambodia, Vietnam, and much of tropical Asia. But here's where it gets interesting. In many Vietnamese Cambodian families, the mother's DNA tends to be Khmer, the father's Vietnamese. This isn't a coincidence. It's a pattern, a quiet echo of how these communities formed. Men moving for labor, for war, for opportunity. Women staying, rooted in place, carrying the land inside them. But the most revealing part of the picture comes when you look at everything together. The autosomal DNA, the full genome, the whole person. In modern studies, Vietnamese samples cluster near East Asian groups. Cambodians form a separate, tighter cluster, more isolated, more ancient. And then in between, there's a bridge, a narrow but distinct genetic space, where Vietnamese Cambodians fall. They don't match either group perfectly. They don't belong fully to one or the other. Instead, they hover in the middle, an overlap, a shared rhythm. They don't carry a brand new genetic code. There's no strange or exotic ingredient. What makes them unique isn't what's in their DNA. It's how much, and from where. A different ratio, a different balance, like a recipe passed down through generations, but with every hand adding something of their own. This is not a new people. It's a new harmony. But harmony is fragile. And what happens when it's shattered by violence? What happens when people who already live between identities are forced to choose, or disappear? Because that's exactly what happened next. And the story buried in their DNA suddenly turned into a fight for survival. The quietest parts of history are often the most painful. In Cambodia, between 1975 and 1979, silence became a weapon. The Khmer Rouge swept through the country with a vision of purity, one that left no room for difference, no tolerance for mixed blood. Vietnamese Cambodians, already living between identities, suddenly found themselves marked, not for who they were, but for everything they weren't allowed to be. Families who had lived on the land for generations were called outsiders. Some had Vietnamese fathers, others Khmer mothers, but it didn't matter. The regime saw them as traitors, collaborators, shadows of Vietnam. So they were hunted. Whole villages disappeared overnight. Children were torn from their parents. Men were lined up and shot. Women were buried alive. Some were forced across the border with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Others vanished entirely. No graves, no names. Only empty places at the dinner table. This wasn't just war. It was a purge, a cleansing of bloodlines. And though bullets and starvation took lives, the deeper wound was genetic. Thousands of potential children, entire branches of family trees, were erased before they ever existed. Scientists today call it a bottleneck event. But that cold term hides the truth. It was a genocide. And its impact is still visible, not just in photographs or survivor stories, but in the genes of those who remain. When you look at the DNA of modern Vietnamese Cambodians, you can see it. Missing variations, broken links, genetic absences, where there should have been abundance. Their DNA holds holes, not because they drifted away from their roots, but because someone tried to cut those roots out. It's a silence you can measure, a gap created by violence. After the regime fell, Vietnam stepped in. The People's Republic of Kampuchea brought some order, and with it, a strange kind of restoration. Movement across the border began again. Vietnamese troops, traders, teachers. Some returned to Cambodia. Some stayed. Marriages resumed. Children were born. But the wounds hadn't healed. They'd simply gone underground. Identities became more tangled. Some hid their ancestry to survive. Others leaned into it, trying to reclaim what had been taken. Either way, the gene flow picked up again. But this time, it wasn't driven by hope. It was shaped by trauma. Along the Mekong, you can still find the survivors. They live in floating villages, small wooden homes balanced on blue barrels. They sell fish, mend nets, pray quietly. Most don't talk about what they saw, but in their silence, they carry something precious. Genetic archives, pieces of history that never made it into the textbooks. Their bodies are living time capsules. And when scientists study the data, using complex models, statistics, S&P patterns, they find the same story repeating. Gene flow from Vietnam into Cambodia, not the other way around. It's written in the numbers, but it feels more like grief. A one-way movement, forced by fear, not choice. A population trying to rebuild itself, piece by fragile piece. These people don't just carry mixed DNA. They carry absence. Gaps. Not from migration, but from murder. Their uniqueness doesn't come from where they are on a map, but from what they've lost. But even through this loss, something else has survived. A sense of self. A question of belonging. And that question still lingers, echoing in their names, in their languages, in the way they move between worlds. Because after everything, they're still asked, are you Vietnamese? Are you Cambodian? And maybe the real answer is neither. Or maybe it's both. But how do you live between two cultures that don't fully claim you? Especially when your own body says you belong to both. Imagine growing up in a home where the language you speak doesn't match the blood running through your veins. Where your last name sounds Vietnamese, your school teaches Vietnamese history, but your grandmother's prayers, soft and trembling, are whispered in Khmer. This is the daily reality for many Vietnamese Cambodians. They move through life, wearing the clothes of one culture while carrying the memory of another inside them. Their identity is not worn on their sleeves. It's hidden, protected, camouflaged. After years of war and forced silence, many Vietnamese Cambodians learned that survival sometimes meant becoming invisible, blending in, adapting. In post-genocide Cambodia, having a Vietnamese name could keep you safe. Speaking Vietnamese could help you get work. But behind those words and faces, the DNA tells a different story. Many of these individuals carry strong markers of Khmer ancestry, proof that no matter what society calls them, they still belong to Cambodia's oldest people. But it's not that simple, is it? Because identity isn't just genetics. It's how people see you. And Vietnamese Cambodians often find themselves in a strange middle space, not fully accepted by either side. In Vietnam, they're seen as two Khmer. In Cambodia, two Vietnamese. Neither country fully claims them. And so they become something else entirely, something unspoken. Even within their own communities, there's no single story. In the floating villages of Tunnel Sap, where life drifts with the tide, families speak a blend of both languages, cook foods from both traditions, and pass down stories in whichever tongue feels safest. In places like Pre Vang or Candal, closer to the border, others lean more Vietnamese, their cultural habits shaped by decades of migration and settlement. They might live just hours apart, but their identities follow different rhythms, like songs sung in different keys. Anthropologists have seen this before in other border people, like the Thai Khmer hybrids of eastern Thailand, who also carry blended ancestry and uncertain status, or the Cham Vietnamese in central Vietnam, whose ancestors once ruled their own kingdom before being swallowed by empire. In all these cases, genetics and culture don't walk side by side. Sometimes they move in opposite directions, and that creates a tension you can feel, not just in research papers, but in how these people live their lives. The world wants simple answers. Where are you from? What are you? But Vietnamese Cambodians can't answer with one word. Their truth is layered, shifting, both visible and hidden. They are genetically shared, but socially isolated. Living proof that identity isn't fixed, it's negotiated every day. But even in this quiet struggle, there's something powerful. Because while the world keeps asking who they are, science has started to answer how they were shaped. And those answers, those patterns locked inside their DNA, reveal something even deeper, something unexpected. Not just about who they are, but about what they carry. Inside, you might expect a group as genetically layered as Vietnamese Cambodians to carry rare diseases, mysterious mutations, some strange trait that makes them stand out in a lab. But that's not the case. Their uniqueness isn't in strange anomalies, it's in the quiet, familiar patterns they share with the world around them. Patterns shaped not by miracles, but by time. Take G6PD deficiency. It's a condition that affects how the body handles certain foods and medications. It's not rare in Southeast Asia, it's actually common. Among the Khmer, around 94% of those with G6PD deficiency carry the same variant, Vietnamese. In the Kin Vietnamese, that number is still high, about 60%. So what about Vietnamese Cambodians? They almost certainly carry both lines. Their risk, their biology, their vulnerabilities, they're not isolated. They're inherited, blended, shared. The same goes for thalassemia, a blood disorder passed silently through generations. In Vietnam, up to half the population carries the gene. In Cambodia, nearly 40%. These numbers don't lie. They show a region shaped by deep, ancient adaptation. These weren't random accidents. They were survival traits, built slowly, over millennia. But DNA doesn't just carry stories of recent history. In Southeast Asia, something far older sleeps inside us. Something from a time before nations, before language. A time when humans weren't even entirely human. Deep in the genomes of people across this region, including Vietnamese Cambodians, scientists have found traces of archaic ancestry. Fragments of DNA from a mysterious group known as the Denisovans. These ancient cousins of ours left behind gifts. Tiny segments of genetic code that may have helped with immunity, with survival in humid tropics, with the heat, the altitude, the infections. These fragments don't just tell us where we came from. They show us what we had to overcome. So when we say the DNA of Vietnamese Cambodians is unique, we don't mean it's alien or rare. We mean it's layered. It's reflective. It holds echoes of empire, of migration, of survival. It's not a puzzle with missing pieces. It's a mirror. And when you hold it up to history, you see everything that was never written down. But there's something else this mirror shows. Something no genetic test can measure. Because while DNA can reveal where you came from, it can't always explain what you carry in your heart. And in the case of Vietnamese Cambodians, that weight isn't just inherited through chromosomes. It's inherited through memory, through loss, through stories never told. And to understand that, we need to leave the lab behind and step into the lives of those who still carry this history every day. An old woman sits by the edge of the river, her hands weathered and soft, curled around a photograph, nearly worn thin by time. The corners are torn, the faces are faded, but to her, they're alive. Her father in a Vietnamese uniform, her mother with Khmer eyes. Behind her, the laughter of children rings out, bright and careless, as they chase each other through the muddy path behind her home. They don't know the full story yet, but it's inside them, waiting. You see, identity isn't something you wear like a badge. It's not fixed by borders or languages. It's fluid, like water. It follows the shape of the land, the pull of history, the weight of memory. Vietnamese Cambodians were never meant to fit in a neat box. They've always lived in between two countries, two cultures, two truths. But that doesn't make them lost. It makes them rare. Because in a world obsessed with categories, they remind us that humanity was never meant to be divided. Their DNA is not a confusion, it's a conversation. Between East and South, between empire and exile, between mother and father. Their ancestors moved like the Mekong, carving through the land, leaving traces behind, always flowing. So if you carry this blood, if your family speaks in more than one tongue, if your last name doesn't match your face, or your passport doesn't match your heart, know this. You are not broken. You are not incomplete. You are a continuation. You are the proof that history doesn't die. It adapts. And if you've ever felt like no one else could understand your story, maybe someone watching this does. Maybe they felt it too. That quiet pull between identities. The questions that don't have easy answers. So share it. In the comments, in your own words. Let someone else feel less alone. Because somewhere out there, someone's waiting to see their reflection in yours. And if this journey through blood and memory has meant something to you, if you believe that DNA isn't just a code, but a story worth telling, then like, share, and subscribe. Help us keep uncovering the truths buried just beneath the surface. Because while this story may end here, there's another one already forming in the silence. And what if your story is next?